From the outside, they looked like just another rock band, chasing the illusion of progress. But it was the lowest in them that connected with the highest in us. What if I told you that the band responsible for some of the most hauntingly beautiful rock songs of all time got their big break because their album cover was massively offensive to Limp Bizkit, led by Fred Durst? Somewhere between a $2,500 debut album that local print shops refused to touch, over 15 million records sold worldwide, 3 consecutive #1 albums, and enough confessional lyrics to power an entire generation, they became the soundtrack to personal rock bottoms and quiet breakthroughs. In the late 1990s, when nu metal was exploding across America, one band stood apart from the crowd. This is the story of Stained. The music may have started decades ago, but the impact continues today. If you want more deep dives, rare stories, and unforgettable moments from the world of divorced dad rock, subscribe now and help keep the legacy alive. Our story begins with Aaron Lewis, lead vocalist, rhythm guitarist, and the emotional core of everything Stained would become. Born in Rutland, Vermont on April 13, 1972, Aaron moved to Springfield, Massachusetts in 1980. His childhood was difficult, isolated, and defined by instability. His parents went through multiple separations before finally divorcing when Aaron was only 13 years old. Through those turbulent years, one person stood as a pillar of comfort and stability. His grandfather, Corky, a World War II veteran. But when Corky passed, Aaron and his immediate family were cut off entirely by the rest of the family. What followed were years of severe abandonment anxiety. Emotional anxiety that first seeped into Aaron's poetry at the age of 14, long before he became a rock star. Aaron was learning how to channel and control his pain. The ability to do so would eventually save his life and become Stained's greatest strength. Aaron wasn't trying to become a celebrity. He was trying to make sense of his life, and millions of fans would eventually connect with that honesty. After years of being tormented by feelings of betrayal stemming from a deeply dysfunctional family, it was finally time to break the cycle. Next came lead guitarist Mike Mushak. Born in Ludlow, Massachusetts on April 10, 1970, Mike's musical foundation was built the old-fashioned way, alone in a room, obsessing over the instrument. A Fender Bullet guitar showed up under the Christmas tree in 1982, and that was the riff that started it all. Mike played at school parties and small gigs, cycling through several bands throughout his teens and early 20s, always struggling to find the right singer. In 1993, he met Aaron Lewis at a Christmas party in Springfield, Massachusetts. The two quickly bonded over their shared love of music, and the rest is history. Mike was structured, focused, grounded. He was the one who figured out how to channel all that pain into something that could fill an arena. Known for his unconventional guitar tuning, a baritone drop G-sharp that gave Stained its signature low, heavy, ominous quality, Mike became the reason their songs feel like they have weight, like they're physically pressing on your chest. While many guitarists chased flashy solos, Mike chased the atmosphere. Massive, melodic, recognizable within seconds. Many of Stained's biggest songs began with a simple yet powerful Mike Mushak guitar progression. A progression so powerful, one moment your eyes wide open, willing to throw it all away to mud shovel, and the next, you're in a warm, safe place, reminiscing to, "It's been a while." Next came John Wysocki. Born on January 17, 1971, in Westfield, Massachusetts. Unlike many rock drummers, John's first instrument was actually the violin. As a child, he also played saxophone, trumpet, and trombone through school music programs. In an interview, he explained that while sitting in the school band, he would constantly look toward the drummer and think, "I want to do that." John was eventually brought into the fray by Mike Mushak after meeting at the Infinity, a music venue in Massachusetts, in 1993. His powerful, hard-hitting yet controlled style helped define the backbone of Stained's early sound. He was drawn to their raw emotion, honesty, and relentless drive. John remained a steady force through years of struggle and breakthrough success, helping transform Stained from a local Massachusetts club act into a multi-platinum rock powerhouse. His drumming was never about flash or excess. It was always about feel, precision, and serving the song in exactly the right way. In later interviews, John mentioned that his personal favorite Stained album to work on was 14 Shades of Grey, rather than Break the Cycle or Dysfunction. John's story takes a more difficult turn later in his career, as he left Stained in 2011 under complicated and painful circumstances, which we'll get to. Next came Johnny April, born on March 27, 1965, in Enfield, Connecticut, making him the oldest member of the band. Long before sold-out arenas and platinum albums, Johnny was just a young musician from Massachusetts, chasing the sound that would define his future. Drawn to the power of rock music, he honed his skills on bass while navigating the local club scene. Everything aligned when he joined forces with Aaron Lewis and the musicians who would become Stained. What began as a shared dream grew into a brotherhood. Through success, setbacks, and decades of change, Johnny remained loyal, believing in the music, the friendship, and the band they built together. Johnny joined in November 1995, completing what would become the original lineup that took Stained from club stages to arenas. In many ways, he's the band's foundation, the low end holding the whole structure together. He also contributed backing vocals, a detail that often gets overlooked, because Aaron is very much there at the front. Johnny's steady presence often flew under the radar, but his bass work became the heartbeat of Stained's sound. Adding to the group, Sal Giancarelli, born on September 15, 1975 in Syracuse, New York. Sal built his place in the band's world by touring as a dedicated drum technician for John Wysocki. When John walked out in 2011, mid-album, mid-tension, mid-everything, Sal stepped in to fill tour dates while the dust settled. Through touring, recording, and years of collaboration, he became a steady and valued part of the band's next chapter. While Sal has never publicly revealed a favorite Stained song or album, his commitment to performing material from every era of the band's career shows a deep appreciation for the catalog he inherited. He went on to record with the band on their 2023 album, Confessions of the Fallen. From drum tech to credited band member. In 1995, the four musicians, Aaron Lewis, Mike Mushak, John Wysocki, and Johnny April, officially formed Stained. The Massachusetts music scene wasn't exactly overflowing with opportunities, but the band played wherever they could. Club Infinity, an underground club in Springfield, Massachusetts, was the first club where they regularly performed. Macara's was another underground Springfield area club, giving them a stage to build an early following. During their early years, the group played covers of bands like Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains. At the Infinity, the covers were the only ticket to getting gigs. It was virtually impossible for an unknown band to get booked in the Springfield area without playing covers. Long drives, tiny crowds, little money. The early years were a grind. Aaron once said, "I've done many dishes in my day." Band members reportedly did everything from flipping burgers at McDonald's to mowing lawns just to finance their first record and independent tour. Despite the challenges along the road, the band persevered. Stained independently released their debut album with a title that was a deep personal reflection of the anger, affliction, and agony surrounding Aaron at the time. They recorded Tormented at the Rock Shop in Westfield, Massachusetts, off a budget of roughly $2,500. The album was aggressive, dark, unfiltered. Tormented is a window into the darkness of self-hatred, resentment, and addiction. Rank Your Music described it as a dissonant, abrasive, painful mess of sound that will make your ears bleed, and I love it. Many band members noted the production was especially rough. Mike Mushak himself had a famously blunt take. We have a lot of fans who say, "I love Tormented." I'm like, have you ever listened to it? Because I can't. It's pretty incredible that the group was able to create such an impactful album on a rough $2,500 budget they scraped together. In the beginning, the group had to rely on selling physical CDs of Tormented out of a box at their club performances, face to face, hand to hand. Just, "Hey, we just played. Here's our tape. That'll be a few bucks." Speaking of CDs, the artwork for Tormented was so intense, the album release party had to be delayed because local printing shops refused to print the cover art. Despite the backlash, the controversial artwork ended up being the catalyst that launched their entire journey. Tormented was an incredible first entry into the Stained discography. Fans could already hear the truth of torment, articulated so clearly from a man so hurt, so broken, that his confessions gave us no choice but to look within. The Bleeding Bible, that nearly ended everything before it even started. Stained was set to open for Limp Bizkit in 1997 at the Webster Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. The situation was starting to look like a disaster after Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit's frontman, was infuriated by the CD art for Tormented. The cover depicts a bloody doll on a crucifix with nails hanging from a plastic frame, a man buried with a rosary dangling from his nose, a knife impaling a Bible, surrounded by 357 caliber bullets, and the word "Tormented" written in blood. Fred initially wanted them removed from the concert bill entirely, but after hearing Stained perform live, everything changed. Durst was impressed. Instead of removing them, he became one of the biggest supporters of Stained and Aaron Lewis. Fred called Mike's phone at 2 a.m. that night, inviting the band to Jacksonville, Florida, to work on new material. They packed into a van and drove south. Fred eventually called Flip Records president Jordan Schur, played a demo over the phone, and arranged a label showcase in Los Angeles. Within weeks, Stained was on a plane to L.A. They signed with Flip Records, a subsidiary of Elektra, in February 1998. Dysfunction, released on April 13, 1999, was recorded with producer Terry Date, the man behind Pantera's Far Beyond Driven and Deftones' first 4 projects. Date knew how to balance aggression and emotion, which he showcased brilliantly with Stained. This album gave us our first real taste of vulnerability, overpowering aggression, inner condemnation, transitioning to inner reflection. It represented a major shift. The production improved dramatically, the songwriting matured, and Aaron continued exploring deeply personal subject matter, rather than following a man into his final descent. Dysfunction acts as a self-examination of childhood and family trauma, along with relationships and addiction. With how relatable these feelings are presented, it's no wonder Dysfunction reached double platinum status on February 26, 2004. Tracks like Mud Shovel and Home became rock radio staples. For the first time, Stained found a national audience. But success brought pressure. Fred pushed for a more aggressive image, bringing friction and creative debates behind the scenes. Aaron just wanted to feel things out loud, and the rest of the band supported him by making the album their way. Later that same year, Fred brought Aaron out on stage with just an acoustic guitar at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum. Aaron played an acoustic song he'd been sitting on for years. Break the Cycle, released through Flip Records and Elektra Entertainment. On May 8, 2001, it is Stained's most successful album to date, and the album that broke them into the mainstream. The album debuted at number 1 and held that position for 3 consecutive weeks on the U.S. album charts. It sold at least 4 million copies in 2001 alone and was certified 5 times platinum by the RIAA for sales of over 5 million units in the U.S. Outside had an extraordinary backstory itself. The most famous version of Outside wasn't originally intended to be a hit. During the 1999 Family Values tour, Aaron was asked to perform a solo acoustic song. He chose an unfinished song he'd been working on for years and completed parts of the lyrics while performing it live. The spontaneous performance became a radio sensation, helping introduce a broader audience to Stained before the release of Break the Cycle. Outside is a deeply introspective song about feeling emotionally isolated, recognizing the flaws in both yourself and someone you love, and struggling to find peace amid heartbreak and self-doubt. In the song, he says, "'Cause inside you're ugly like me." Rather than portraying one person as the villain, the song acknowledges shared flaws and mutual damage. Outside is different, because the narrator recognizes his own role in the dysfunction. The song moves from accusation to self-awareness. As requested as Outside was, It's Been a While was the lead single, and became one of the defining rock songs of the early 2000s. It spent a record-breaking 20 weeks at the top of the Billboard mainstream rock charts, and became Stained's signature song. Aaron originally wrote it at 16 years old and performed it at the Infinity. He stated, "Nobody would listen to the song. I would start playing, everyone started talking, or went to get another drink, or anything else but listen." The song explored regret for losing the one woman who was curing his addiction, showing him the good in the evil he'd faced, and getting him back on his feet. In the song he says, "It's been a while, but all that shit seems to disappear when I'm with you." Themes that resonated across generations. The album balanced heavy tracks with emotional ballads, a risky move that worked beautifully. Behind the scenes, fame was becoming increasingly complicated. Aaron was now a household name, and the spotlight wasn't always comfortable. 14 Shades of Grey. Released on May 20th, 2003, this album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, with first-week sales of 220,000 copies, and was certified gold, then platinum, by July 2003. Mike described the album title in a 2003 interview. "I think it's kind of referring to how in life there's black and white, and then there's this gray area. I think the older you get, you start to realize that more things are gray and not so much black and white." Aaron elaborated on the album's direction by saying, "It's kind of a logical progression where we're getting older now. Mike is married, and I'm married now with a kid. We're that much deeper into figuring things out, lyrically, and as songwriters. From a personal growth standpoint, 14 Shades of Grey is a step in the right direction. Moral ambiguity, the gray areas of human behavior, the exhaustion of sobriety, grief over loved ones, and the slow, unglamorous work of becoming a functional person serve as the underlying themes." So Far Away spent 14 weeks at the top of the rock chart. Price to Play was everywhere, and Zoe Jane, a devastatingly tender song Lewis wrote for his daughter, showed a new dimension of the man who had spent years singing about violence, addiction, and abandonment. Around this time, some fans questioned whether Stained was drifting too far into the gray. But gray was never weakness, it was wisdom. Ultimately, fans who had been tormented alongside them, surviving their own dysfunction, followed them into the gray. Chapter 5. The title is deliberate, with Chapter 5 counting Tormented as Chapter 1. Most bands would have quietly tried to pretend their low-budget, bleeding Bible debut didn't exist. Stained included it in their official numbering. They owned the whole story. Chapter 5 released on August 9, 2005. It debuted at #1 on the U.S. Billboard 200, with first-week sales of 185,000 copies, and has since sold over 1.2 million copies in the U.S. and 1.5 million worldwide. It was Stained's third consecutive album to reach #1, after selling over 10 million units across their previous 4 albums. Aaron said of the album's success, "Having 3 straight #1 albums was a nice big screw you to a lot of people who have slagged us." After years of mixed critical reviews while selling millions of records, Aaron finally said out loud what the sales figures had been saying all along. By the time Chapter 5 arrived, Stained had matured significantly. This was the most forward-looking album of Aaron's career up to that point. Spiritual faith as a lifeline, accountability, the permanence of personal growth, and gratitude for survival served as the underlying themes. Musically, the record balanced heaviness with introspection. Lyrically, Aaron continued exploring personal struggle. Maintaining momentum year after year was becoming increasingly difficult. The music industry itself was changing. Downloads were replacing CDs. Rock radio was evolving. The landscape looked very different from the one Stained had entered in the late 1990s. With the industry changing in so many ways, Aaron came out with one of the most targeted songs he had ever written, aimed directly at record company executives who idolize money. After years of navigating the music industry machine, Aaron finally released his frustration and didn't bother disguising it. The song was called Paper Jesus. The phrase is a brilliantly cutting metaphor. Paper money, false worship. In the song he says, "So burn your paper Jesus." It takes the imagery of devotion and faith, language Aaron had wrestled with since the overtly religious imagery of Tormented, and turns it into an indictment. These men weren't worshiping God, they were worshiping margins. In owning every chapter, even the ones that made print shops nervous, Chapter 5 proved. The only thing more dangerous than the imagery of Tormented was Aaron Lewis with something to say. After the commercial triumph of Chapter 5 in 2005, Stained entered one of the most turbulent and transformative periods of their career. A stretch of years defined not by chart positions or album releases, but by legal battles, personal loss, private struggle, and the quiet work of rediscovering who they were as a band. Behind the scenes, while the band was touring arenas and topping charts, they were simultaneously fighting a draining legal war over the right to use their own name. A dispute with designer John Stainbrook over trademark rights had been simmering for years, with the band claiming they had never been informed of promises made to Stainbrook by a record executive during a 1999 licensing negotiation. After years of legal confrontation, the parties finally reached a settlement in 2006. Fighting to legally own your identity, while simultaneously trying to make music, is an exhausting and demoralizing battle, the kind that never makes the headlines, but quietly drains everything. During live shows throughout this period, Stained performed Pantera's This Love as a direct tribute to lead guitarist Dimebag Darrell. For Stained, a band that had cited Pantera as a foundational influence since the Tormented days, his death was deeply personal. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the kind of people they are. Men who remember where they came from, and who had helped shape them. By 2008, Stained was ready to come back, but on different terms. 3 years between albums, the longest gap in Stained's career to that point. Aaron had started quietly exploring country music. Side project energy was beginning to seep into the room, and the atmosphere had subtly shifted. The Illusion of Progress debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. On August 19, 2008, their first album to miss number 1 in 7 years. When asked about the recording mindset, Aaron said, "We went into the studio with the mindset of making our heaviest record yet, but the record that came out has flavors of Pink Floyd and straight-up blues. We didn't use the same rigs that we use on stage. We used all vintage guitars and amps, and I'm pretty psyched about it. The songs are pretty timeless in their texture." Singles included The Way I Am, This Is It, which landed on the Transformers' Revenge of the Fallen soundtrack, and Tangled Up in You, a piano-driven love song that Aaron would later re-record for his country EP. Around this time, Aaron had also started a non-profit to reopen his daughter's elementary school in Worthington, Massachusetts. He was building a community, raising kids, and in a very real sense, becoming the man he'd always wanted someone to be for him when he was growing up. The Illusion of Progress represented one of Stain's most experimental moments. The album leaned further into melody and acoustic textures. Aaron explored themes of societal disillusionment, political frustration, marital strain, the illusion of success masking internal emptiness, and the creeping feeling that growth has stalled. The record felt less angry and more contemplative. It reflected musicians entering a different phase of life. Some illusions turn out to be the most honest thing a band ever accidentally made. After years of increasingly melodic releases, Stained surprised many fans. Their self-titled album, Stained, marked a return to heavier territory. The guitars were aggressive, the mood is darker, the energy was intense, both in the public eye and behind the scenes. By 2010, Aaron had finished his country EP and was growing increasingly focused in that direction. The band needed to deliver a new record. They were reportedly close to being in breach of their contract, and so they went into the studio with producer Johnny Kaye, working partially out of Aaron's home studio in Massachusetts. What followed was described by multiple parties as the single most difficult recording process in the band's history. Aaron and Mike were communicating minimally. The atmosphere was described as tense at best, hostile at worst. John Wysocki later said the album's production felt rushed, chaotic, and like distractions were pulling the band apart. In May 2011, John quit. His exact words, "As much as I love this band, and I love you guys, I gotta go. This is not the Stained we started out being." Mike later told Fuse TV, 17 years being a band together, we went to make the record. It just got to the point where we realized that we weren't able to, and it was time to make a change. Note the different framings. John quit. The band says it was time to make a change. The truth probably lives somewhere in between. Sal, John's own drum tech, who knew every part intimately, stepped in. The album came out September 13, 2011. It debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200. Singles included Not Again, Eyes Wide Open, and Something to Remind You. The album had the raw, heavy feel of their earlier work, a deliberate attempt to reconnect with their roots. In November 2011, the band announced Sal as an official member, but the cracks were visible. In July 2012, they announced a hiatus. Aaron told Billboard, "We're not breaking up. We're just going to take a little hiatus that really hasn't ever been taken in our career. We put out 7 records in 14 years. We've been pretty busy." And then, silence. Stained entered a period of reduced activity. Aaron increasingly focused on his solo country career. Mike co-founded Saint Asonia, a hard rock supergroup, while Johnny and Sal remained silent. Some fans wondered whether Stain's story had ended, but the connection between the music and its audience never disappeared. Eventually, the band returned to the stage. The songs still mattered. Confessions of the Fallen, the 8th studio album by Stained, released on September 22, 2023. The band's first album in 12 years. The first album to feature Sal as a credited studio member, and the first album released through BMG. 12 years is a long time in any industry, but in music, where trends move fast and attention moves faster, coming back after that long of a silence and still being relevant is genuinely remarkable. The title, Confessions of the Fallen, is perfectly chosen. Not a triumphant comeback statement, not a nostalgia exercise, but a genuine reckoning. A man in his 50s, looking back at everything he has been through, putting it into words. Musically, Mike said that Aaron wanted to experiment with synthesizers and had worked with a programmer to develop those sounds. For a band whose sonic identity had always been built on raw guitars and Aaron's voice, incorporating synthesizers was a bold, creative decision, and one that paid off commercially. The lead single, Lowest in Me, was released on April 19, 2023. The track marked Stain's return to the airwaves after over a decade, quickly gaining traction on rock radio and ultimately peaking at #1 on the Billboard Mainstream Rock Airplay chart, the band's first such achievement since 2011. Aaron said, "It's taken me a long time to be ready to do another Stained record. I got really burnt out on digging into the dark corners of my psyche every night to deliver those very deep, dark songs in a manner that was believable and authentic." That single quote reframes the entire 12-year gap between albums. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't indifference. It was a man who had spent decades mining the darkest parts of himself for his art, and who needed to step back from that excavation before it consumed him entirely. Aaron also said of finally deciding the time was right. "I don't know if there was ever a right time or a wrong time. It just felt like it was finally time to do it." 12 years of silence. Then when Aaron Lewis finally had enough to say, he walked back into the room, hit #1 on rock radio, and reminded everyone that the fallen only stay down if they choose to. From tiny Massachusetts clubs to platinum records. From getting ignored at Club Infinity while people went out to their cars to smoke, to selling over 15 million records. But the real legacy is every fan who heard themselves, because somewhere in those 14 shades of gray, between Outside and It's Been a While, Stained found the only thing that ever really mattered: connection. If you have ever turned up the volume and felt less alone, in the lyrics, in the honesty, in the pain, then these shirts were made for you. For everyone who found themselves in the music. Available now through the link in the description. Help keep the legacy alive by dropping your favorite Stained memory in the comments. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.